Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. In this episode, Oscar and I delve into the landscape of a martial artist's growth. From how to get started to finding one's rhythm, we will be sharing our personal stories and offering advice from our experience. Join us as we explore martial arts progression and effective strategies for success. We discuss those unavoidable aspects of any martial arts journey, the plateau and injuries. Whether you're at the starting line or already a seasoned martial artist, listen on for an insightful exploration of the martial arts journey. I apologize if the sound is a little off compared to usual as we endure some tech issues. My favor as usual, however, is to please continue to share this podcast with others. It would also mean so much if you rate it and leave me feedback. If you would like to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, visit my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to become a patron of the show. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Ask.
Hello, Mimi.
Ask. Oscar, as my family calls you.
Yeah, which I like. I like that one.
You like Oscar?
Yeah, there's different iterations.
There are.
So there's the one that you sometimes say because you've heard my mom call me that, which is
Oscar.
There's what you call me. Right, there's what you call me, which is usually
Oscar.
Right. There's what your Jamaican family calls me.
Oscar.
There's what your dad calls me.
Daito-jai.
There's what that friend of ours in England.
Oz.
Yeah.
The only person.
There's only one person.
And you like that one a lot.
I like Oz.
I know you do.
I don't want to be like,
call me Oz.
Hey, I'm going by Oz now. So
it's weird he just has always called you that.
Yeah.
And you just rolled with it.
Roll with it. I don't... Call me whatever you like, as long as it's respectful.
The Oz of Wallum.
So, yeah.
The Wallum of Oz.
I think we can work on it. We got things to work on.
Okay, well, we have just returned from a very long trip. And today is clearly the sweatpants, kind of day. And it's a little cooler here. Came back to another temperature, but also, we got to see the world.
We did. We went to Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, Hong Kong. That's it.
Really what we did was eat around Asia. It was a tour of food around Asia, but that is not what we're talking about today. Although if anybody is interested, let us know, and we will certainly dedicate an episode to all of the food we ate, which is very evident in how my joints have been feeling. And hence today I'm just kind of doing lacrosse ball stuff because, we're in the gym and that's what we do, right? But I believe you have some, not questions from students, but things that have come up. And we thought it would be really good to kind of, if I had a blackboard or a whiteboard here.
This is a blackboard, sort of.
No, it's a black curtain, very different. But I could, do like a little timeline or a little, what's it called, graph or something.
I think that can be arranged.
Okay,
We'll start doing,
as if we're like professors or something.
Right. Thinking of that lessons in chemistry.
Yes, which, by the way, everybody, Lessons in Chemistry, fantastic read.
And a fantastic show.
So far, we are loving it. Have not finished it yet. But trigger warning for those that we are recommending this to, because this is something that I would like when people recommend books, is there is sexual assault. And so, but you can very easily skip over that section and still really enjoy the story and the writing and the show as well. So that's our little quick recommend. But basically, if I had a board to kind of draw out like kind of the map, we're kind of thinking of talking about that, the journey of a martial artist, basically like your martial arts journey, what that could look like from a training perspective and progressions and kind of, the timeline. So we start off at the beginning.
Right. So we can break it down into beginning your martial arts journey, Then you're in the martial arts journey, there's going at the beginning, there's going to be some frustrations, right? No injuries necessarily, but maybe frustration with how you're learning or excitement. Like both things can be happening. There's a point where maybe you start hitting your stride and you're feeling pretty good. There's a point where you hit a plateau. There's no improvement that you can think of. There could be a point of injury where you have to take a step back. And there is the end. Just kidding. There's never an end if you're a martial artist.
The end is death.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. We are all going to die.
Right.
Hopefully not soon. But if I did have a board behind me, it's kind of funny. I was kidding at first, but this would actually be super visual. Like, and if our journey started here, one of the things I actually was talking to one of my younger students about is which one looks like a journey of your martial arts, or how you think in your mind it should go. You know, should it be like this, which is basically just a diagonal line straight, or should it be like a staircase, right? And the young student said, oh, obviously, you know, like a straight arrow going straight up nonstop. And then I kind of showed that line and then that drop off line. Like what happens is you get here to the top and you just drop straight off because it's called burnout. But that staircase, and we're kind of talking about the staircase journey right now.
Actually, I think,
which sometimes will have a drop off, which is the injury.
Correct. So I think
rebuild a new staircase.
It could be a staircase, or it could be more of this wavy. It's a undulating, waving line.
Yeah, we can make all sorts of shapes.
Yeah, all sorts of shapes because there's usually a drop off. When a beginner student or a younger student looks at progression or the beginning of any journey, they think of these linear lines, these straight lines, but it's because they are not in a negative way. They're short-sighted, right? Yeah. So as big as you make that seam, it may look like a straight line, but if they were to take a few steps back and look at it from a 50,000 foot view, then they would notice that is just a very small portion of their journey. And in the beginning, there's that diagonal line. It's just that they think that may be indefinite, and it's not. But if we can look at it as more as a staircase, maybe one way to look at it.
Staircase with ramps, you know. I
like the undulating idea because as long as from point A to B, at the end you're a little bit higher, but the journey it's like there's valleys, there's peaks, and all of that involved. So
and to be fair too, it is okay if your point drops below what you thought it was, quote unquote below, right? And that's why that wave is really nice, because it gives us this visual of like, this doesn't, coming below this what we consider to be our bar doesn't mean we've regressed. It's just sometimes we need that moment, right? Things happen in life. So we'll start at the beginning, and that's a very good place to start. A little Sound of Music throwback. Okay. And essentially, that's actually a hard place because we meet so many people that tell us it takes years before they come through the doors.
Right.
So starting, you should already feel like, yes, that is a huge accomplishment, because actually being brave enough or prioritizing the time and yourself to start something like a martial arts journey is a huge deal. And we should always celebrate that.
Right. I think the percentage of people who come through the door versus the people who maybe visit a website, it's got to be like 0.01%. It's got to be super low. So just the fact of you not just coming to visit let's say for our instance, for the Wallam Kung Fu Temple, but whatever it is that you're starting, the fact that you step into the door and are physically and in person inquiring, and then you take that leap of faith and actually start, puts you in a very low percentage of people who do that, but in what I would call an upper echelon of people. So just being part of that journey is already, I think, you're winning. You're starting off.
Yeah. And so for our viewers, listeners, friends out there that maybe haven't started that journey, but have said, I'm going to do it next year, or I can't until I'm in better shape, or I don't have time right now, or we do understand like sometimes it is a luxury to do, like fiscally, you can't always financially make this a priority. However, there are things you can still do on your own, right? Through meditation. I don't ever recommend learning online from the YouTubes or anything like that. But there are things you can do to just kind of strengthen your body. But how can we help those who have been hesitant and maybe have the means to get started, but just don't have the catalyst that is really driving them to get through the door of one of their martial arts schools or getting started on a program even for fitness, right?
The thing with doing something that you know you should be doing, that you know is good for you, unfortunately, there has to be an incentive. And unfortunately, that incentive is usually bad news, right? Mm-hmm. Like the thing that pushes us to finally do that thing.
Yeah.
It's not always a great reason. Like it's not a great reason. It's not always happy news. It's, I came from the doctor and he told me that I should be doing this.
My friend experienced this and it woke me up.
Right. I drove by here 20 years ago and I wanted to do it. And now 20 years have passed and now I'm finally doing it. There's this breaking point. And there's an author, David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done. And this is just very visual for me because, as you know, I have a little bit of OCD when it comes to dental health. I'm always flossing and brushing my teeth.
You are.
But he said something like, he was giving a presentation and he said, did you know, this is to a group of people, that 10% of the people here didn't brush their teeth this morning? And he said, and the reason is because they are okay with that little level of grit. Mm-hmm. They'll brush their teeth later, maybe, or maybe, hopefully. But some people don't allow for that little level of grit. And I think it's the same with life and the same with anything that we want to do. Like the way that you're living your life and whatever your goals are, some people are okay with a certain amount of like that little bit of grit. Let's just call that the thing that's holding them back. And some people are not. Some people are like, no, I can't even have that. I have to start it. But to bring it back to your question of like what'll bring people on is, unfortunately, I just think that it's at some point, it's a breaking point. They've reached that level of discomfort. I've got to finally brush my teeth.
Way to be on the positive. Now, to kind of give maybe a flip side of that is a lot of people get inspired, right? They maybe saw Kung Fu Panda. That's why kids sometimes want to come in. Or honestly, my friends are doing it. And so I want to do something where I want to be with a community. Mm-hmm. And so unfortunately, you're right. Life instances that bring us strife often pushes us to the next thing. But I do believe that there are instances where I've certainly heard people come through the door back when we used to do a lot of shows and things like that at the big stages, but even Lunar New Year, right? People are inspired by seeing their friends do stuff or just seeing us make a difference in the community or bring joy, and people can get really excited. So hopefully it's not a major life.
Well, you know what? Maybe it comes down to incentives, and the incentives can be positive or negative.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely. So find your incentive. I think instead of sitting around and waiting for, like, if you fall in the category of this, like martial arts is something you've always wanted to do, just do it. Right? Just get started. And that could just mean making a call and starting a conversation, and hopefully someone can kind of lead you in the right direction. Now, that next phase, we're kind of categorizing just like the big three, right? Mm-hmm. Like we get started, then we're progressing, hitting a stride, improving, however you want to define it, all those things, right?
Right. And then there's maybe hitting a plateau, and then maybe there's an injury, maybe there's a setback. Mm-hmm. So I think in the beginning, especially with someone who is, with strength training for sure. Okay, with strength training for sure, when you have someone who's a novice, the gains that they get that first 8 weeks are just amazing, because the body has already this capacity. And what they start doing is they start putting things together, this mind-body connection, and they realize, oh, I was actually way stronger than I thought. I just didn't know how to do this. And that is super inspiring. And so you want to try to ride that wave, right? With Kung Fu and Tai Chi, there is that, but there's also frustration. And I think because this is a more intricate movement practice, then you start with going, wow, okay, I am able to do this class. But then there's always, throughout your entire journey, this is specifically with Walam that I've noticed, is, wow, I still have so much more to learn, so much more to improve. I don't see that as that. I don't see that light switch go off as often or as quickly with people who strictly do strength training that I coach. That's not a negative thing. It's just that because of the complexity of the movements and the depth of the way that we teach Kung Fu and Tai Chi, there can lead this little bit of frustration during the beginning of your journey where you're like, I'm not able to do that. And so we just need to add yet to that, right? Because
yeah. I think you're right. There's not to completely simplify and put everyone in a category, but two basic new students. One is super excited and, oh my gosh, I was able to do 0 yesterday. And today I know all these things, even though I don't do them well yet, but they can recognize right away they are completely transformed because you go from 0 to essentially 100 because yesterday you knew nothing and now you know 100% more than yesterday. Right. So you're like, wow, I'm a martial artist. And then we have another student who is usually much harder on themselves, maybe more analytical, maybe have a higher expectation and go in seeing it thinking, well, they make it look pretty easy. So I'm going in, I go to do it and none of it feels right. I saw myself in the mirror. I'm even more mortified now. And we have such a high percentage. I wish I had the statistics for you, but such a high percentage of turnover in that first month because people realize they can't commit the time it's going to take. They realize that it's much harder or they're frustrated. And especially, like you said, with traditional martial arts where you're expected to learn philosophy, maybe another language at the same time. Now you're sequencing patterns of different things and asking for a lot more memory retention than muscle memory. Like it's very involved and it's basically learning a new body language, right? And that is sometimes just a lot and it can be very overwhelming, especially if your instructors aren't helping communicate that to you. And as much as we do our best to try, we reach out, like we have
people
the same
fall
thing.
Through the gaps.
We have a huge turnover in that first month. For whatever reason, people say, you know what, I realize my job's going to take too much time. I see that this is going to take, I can't do it. Yep. And so that not that there's only two types of students, but you generally get.
Those are two pretty broad buckets.
Yeah, wow, I'm doing something I never did. This is awesome. This is so cool. And then you get, wow, this may not be for me because I'm not going to be able to thrive. Right. And so where do we go next? I need the blackboard.
Right. So that's the beginning of the journey, which that beginning is not just the first week, first month, could be first couple of years of that journey.
And already listeners are going, wait a minute, that's the beginning. Yes, friends. The beginning is just a couple years. We consider beginners a couple years.
2 years.
Yeah. Still beginner martial artists for traditional.
For our style.
Wallum, yes.
Right. I think I would consider a beginner someone who's been training less than 2 years. Right?
Yeah.
And there is a variance there because you have the student who's been training for 2 years and comes once a week. And you have the student who's been training 2 years and comes 8 classes a week. Right? So there's a little bit of variance there.
And let's just be fair. If you're a little younger, like even kids, right? They have less stress in their lives in terms of like demands if they're not in other things, right? Not that, and when we're a little bit older, we've gone through a little more, maybe we come with injuries, maybe we come with
mileage.
We come with mileage, exactly. So there's so many variances, but yes.
So that's how I would, then we have now getting into the intermediate type of student. And this is where I think sometimes I had a student ask me, well, what do you do when you feel like you're hitting your stride? Which is really interesting. I don't think I've ever had anyone ask that question. Like, hey, what do I do? I feel like I'm hitting my stride. That's actually a really great place to be because that means that you're, speaking of Kung Fu and Tai Chi, you're putting things together. You're realizing, wow, okay, I'm seeing some patterns. I'm feeling a little better about these things. And I think that's very positive. So this is my advice that I would give to anyone that I train and try to shout it back to myself because I don't think I follow it. But it would be, if you feel like you're hitting your stride and let's say you're my age, you're in your 40s, late 30s, 40s. So you're an intermediate, and you're also a mid-adult. You're middle age. Right. I would say take a step back real quick. Don't completely stop, but just pump on the brakes a little bit and just pay attention. And when you're feeling like really, really good, maybe that's right where you stop. I would say don't keep pushing. This is just my opinion.
When you say pushing, you mean intensity? I want to come 8 more times a week on top of this. Correct. Because I feel like I'm progressing finally.
And realizing that, like you said, we have kids to adults to all the experiences, right? Is to just say, okay, I feel like I'm hitting my stride. I'm feeling really, really good. That has always been when I've pushed hard and had a setback. I've just trained with a good friend of mine, a trainer who's also a personal trainer with a ton of experience, decades of experience, Jose. And he was like, man, I'm feeling really good. All right, what are we going to do next? And I said, you know what? I'm going to be the responsible one here because I want to do more. We're going to stop. We're going to stop right now. Mm-hmm. And that has taken a long time to realize that. But I think in that instance, I had put on the coach hat and I was able to stop. I think if it was the other way around and I was the student, I would have been, no, I want to do more. Mm-hmm. And I was actually proud of myself for that, for giving that advice. But I was immediately going, make yourself listen to that advice. So when you're hitting your stride at a certain age and certain things are going on, I think it's a great time to stop when you're feeling really good. Mm-hmm. And not say, because I'm feeling good, I'm going to push harder. Mm-hmm. I know that's a little bit counterintuitive, but I think it's good advice for that age. Now, I'm sure you have advice for younger students, teenagers that you've trained and pushed pretty hard as well. So I don't know where you fall.
I feel like it's changed, right? I think the distractions young people have now weigh so heavily on them. I don't think they're built the same as 20 years ago, right? So I feel like a 14-year-old or 12-year-old or something now versus 20 years ago really do have different mindsets. Yeah. And I think this is where, you start getting old. You're like, oh, back in the day, we were able to X, Y, Z. And I don't know that we were able to do more. It's just, I feel like there's less.
We didn't have as much demand, maybe?
I think there's more distraction, which puts younger people in positions, physically, in positions and mentally that are inopportune for healthy body movement. I feel generations before probably said that about TV. Kids who watch TV were physically less capable because they didn't go outside and play as much and move around. And now it's even more extreme. They're not even watching TV. They're on a device that's stuck to their hand. We talked about your fingers not even being able to move properly. So I feel like the demands are different. So I would say if I have a young martial artist that has said, this is my focus and I'm going to be really dedicated, I can probably keep pushing them. But that is where you need a good teacher to make sure they are making the smart decisions, because really that way the student doesn't have to be burdened with, okay, wait, how am I feeling? Where am I at? I mean, I can ask the questions and then I can make the decisions, but I can usually see visually where they're at. I don't usually have to ask.
So you're saying a good teacher would be able to put it into context for the student to say,
definitely,
hey, okay, I can see that you want to push hard, but maybe you're the one who's putting the brakes on just for a conversation to say, let's make sure that you are going to be able to push harder. Mm-hmm. And because there's a question that I ask all of my clients who do online coaching when they're prepping for the week, which is, how are you feeling for the week? You feel like you can do the actions you said you're going to do. Are you putting it on your calendar? And then at the end, the last question is something to the effect of, you understand that in order to be successful, you need to have the proper amount of sleep, hydration, stress level, all these things. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, your goals won't be there. So that's regardless, I think, of age, right?
Definitely.
But so we're talking about hitting the stride, feeling really good, maybe wanting to push more. The example, the thing that I want to make super clear is that just approach that with the right mindset, with a little bit of caution, but then, and a little bit more self-reflection maybe is the right way to think about it. And then you can make that stride last longer, because your improvement won't be indefinitely in an upward trajectory. There will be a point where you hit your plateau, which will be the next thing we talk about. But I think the amount of time that you have your stride, that improvement, you can lengthen it by being smart. And that has only come
by training smart,
thinking about it smart, thinking about all those other factors. And that for me has only come with me repeating that multiple times to students, and then realizing, wow, I'm not even listening to my own advice, and realizing, oh, it just happened when we got back from our trip, 3 weeks off. I slowly kind of ramped up a week before, and I felt really good Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I pushed too hard on a Wednesday class, right? And it was because I was feeling good. So, these things happen. So that is, I think, my advice on the stride part, the hitting the stride.
I think something that we should also bring attention to is noticing these different phases, because we could in our mind think, oh, my progression or my stride was really short. My plateau feels so long. But really, if you go to ask your teacher, they may have it completely reversed. Like, oh no, you were on the incline for a while before you hit that little plateau. So your self-awareness of being able to recognize, what does that mean? Is it a physical feeling? Is it I know more forms feeling? I moved to the next weapon, or I took my test? Like, how do you measure that? And that is so individualistic. That is why some people think they've progressed A to Z in 7 weeks, and somebody who's done it 7 years can be really hard on themselves and be like, I'm horrible at this. I could just give up and quit. You know what I mean? I think it's perspective. But again, I think this is going to be a recurring theme for me. This is where if you have a good Sifu, you have a good teacher, they're going to guide you on that journey, and you have to have trust, because I think parents will feel the same way. Teachers at school feel the same way. You can say the same thing to your students until you're blue. And unless they trust you and they're really taking what you say to heart, it doesn't really matter. So in the traditional terms, when you walked into a Kung Fu school or in the village and you found your master, you're giving all your trust and saying, yes, you teach me, I'm going to learn. And by you saying you're there to learn, when in this modern day you sign up as a student, and we've got a really long list of I agree, and I say I'm going to do these things. And for my professional teams, I've got things in there like, you will not whine, you will not complain, because they need to like kind of take an oath knowing I'm going to come into this ready to learn. Right. And that means trusting your Sifu. And that means finding a good Sifu, right? It goes both ways. The Sifus aren't always just right because they're the Sifu. So I think if we trust our Sifu, and our Sifu is looking at our journey and making sure the decisions are made in our best interest, whatever that means. And if they're telling you, no, you're still striding, or no, we're on a plateau and that's okay. Like, it may not align with what you think your stride or your progression is. You may think you're on a plateau, but I may think you're progressing. And so there's going to be sometimes a disconnect. So we need the ability to recognize what's actually happening, what's reality, and what's in our minds of like how we're perceiving things.
Yeah. So
if that makes sense.
Right. I think that the two things that need to be happening at the same time is that trust in the Sifu, having the right instructor, and your mindset, as you said, right? Like people, like if we go back to how you're saying in the past, I think in the past that mindset was already there. Oh, just the fact that you're accepting me, I'm going to put everything I have into it. I think nowadays it's not like that as much. So what we need to do is make it clear to the student, you also have to have the right mindset of the empty vessel, right? The empty cup to receive the information. But all of this comes down to whether it's your Sifu, your instructor doing it for you, yourself, is taking that step, that pause, slight little pause to have the conversation. For the student, I think it's very helpful, especially when you're in that phase, is to do the stop and just look back to the beginning, and you'll realize that you're higher. No matter what your thought is like, yeah, just look back to where you started, and you are, even though you think you haven't improved, you started way over there.
Yeah.
whether it's way down there or way back there, either way is way over there. You've moved forward in a certain way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways that you improve, not just physically, mentally, right? Different ways. So to recap this part so far, we have the beginner, we have our intermediate student, which is hitting their stride. And then there's what we kind of touched upon, which is you feel like you're in a plateau. Now so this is the starting up, boom. We're just now.
And this is everyone's favorite part.
We're just in a plateau.
Never said anyone ever. I think people just hate this even more than injury, because injury usually, maybe not when you're in your 40s, like how I'm feeling, but usually you're like, okay, I had this injury. I usually know by this time it'll be done. Right? Like there feels like there's a like an end time. Like you generally have a gauge of what that's going to be. Even if you're sick, you're not usually sick for months. But when you're on a plateau, it could feel like forever, and it could feel you get anxious because of the unknown. Like, how long am I going to be here where I just feel like I'm not getting better? And there's not we know on September 1, this is going to change suddenly, right? And so plateau, I feel, is really, really difficult for people.
I think now that I think about it, you kind of mentioned that way, I think I would put then plateau and injury on the same thing, because the way you need to approach it mentally is the same. You have to realize that maybe we need to redefine plateau and injury as more of opportunity, right? Because if you feel like you're not progressing, let's say you're not learning new material, right? You've been in the same level for about a year. You can still go deeper into that level, right? If you have an injury, so I'll tell you about my Achilles tendon had a strain, right? So I have what's called Achilles tendinopathy. It's just like, just a little bit of a strain there. It limits certain things you can do, but there's so much more that you can do. This is something that I have talked to my personal training clients a lot about, the strength training clients and students, is the list of things that you are able to do is always going to be so much larger than things that any injury, plateau, and it prevents you from doing. So what you need to do is, with a plateau, with an injury, is you need to define, what am I not able to do? And that should just be a few things. And then just start thinking about all the things you can do. And if you have the right mindset and the right seafood, like we talked about earlier, that list should never end. You should be able to just keep going. And then all you got to do is just choose, okay, well, I'm going to take this opportunity now to work on these things. Easier said than done, especially if your mindset is not, like frustration is there, how you said about the plateau, and really also challenging to do if you're actually physically in pain. So that's
this is really going to be kind of out there, right? But I don't know.
You're telling me.
I'm telling you.
I don't think that anything that you say can be out there compared to the things that I say.
Okay, so I'm not an artist by any means, but I've been working with a lot of artists recently. But I know there's a thing where up close it looks one way, but far away it looks completely different. What if this drawing that we didn't really draw behind us, but we've been drawing, right? Up close looks like waves and looks like staircases, and we see all the things. Here was an injury, that year, yeah. And then we, now we're going up and down. But when we're really far away, it does just look like an inclined line.
Yes. That
right?
doesn't feel, that feels...
Because essentially...
Exactly right.
I actually tell students all the time that we call this the plateau, and I think we should just embrace it and love it, because that is where growth happens. And if growth is actually happening, that means we're going up, right? Or we're going in a direction, right?
Well, you're right.
We are resting. When do you grow? Right. Apparently when you sleep, right? When do things happen? Like, when does your body rejuvenate? When we're sleeping. And so just doing that, sometimes it means, hey, I'm not going to work on doing 100 kicks every class. I'm going to do 10, but really intentional, really good. You're growing, building, improving something. It's just not how a metric that you're used to, assessing it by or analyzing it by. So in your mind, it's a plateau. But essentially, if we are just martial artists, we are constantly improving 1% better every day. And so really, there's none of it, right? There's a start point and an infinite one-day endpoint, which
Are you saying there is no spoon?
morbidly is death. But really, it's just if we could at least get our journey started, I would say that exists. The lack of the journey. But once you're on the journey, right, it's up to you, right, to just kind of keep that going. And so I think it's a matter of, again, if you have a good sifu, they will keep you motivated. They will keep challenging you. They will allow you to realize what you feel is a plateau is really growth. And they will also make you realize when you're injured, there is still growth to be done because there's other areas that you're clearly can be working on. We tell students that have back injuries as, nope, I just got to lay in bed. We have students who've had operations and we're like, oh, you're in the hospital? Great. You know what? You can work on your breathing. You can really develop your diaphragmatic breathing, which is also good for your mind. Meditation, that Bifid Sao, right, which is what we do at beginning class. So there's really, I don't want to use the no excuses, but there's usually no instance where you can't continue to grow as a martial artist unless you're dead.
Right. I think that there's two things, which is, you're right. Starting is that shows why that is so important. And then two, not stopping. That's what as long as you're on the journey, then you take that 50,000 foot view back, and then it is a linear progression. If you take everything into account, like you said, all of the things that you could possibly be working on, even the frustrations, even the tears, the blood, all the times. How many times did I come home and say, "Hey, can you rub my shin out?" And just keep going,
after sparring,
just like rubbing it out. Like all of those things are part of the journey, and so all of that is growth. I think that shows why starting is so important, and it also shows why not stopping is so important. Where someone says, "Well, I'm just going to take a break," but if there's a way that we can still keep them connected, where there's still, there's a student of ours, Jake, who said, "I remember." So frustrated.
You mean Jake, the one that edits this and is listening right now for sure?
That Jake.
That's her baby. Because I don't know, last time he didn't edit out when we said
two. There were two episodes.
There were two episodes. So hopefully this one, I mean, so far we've been going pretty strong, but just a little jab
hopefully he's
there.
Listening. But there was a time where he sprained his ankle pretty bad. And he's like, I was so frustrated, but you guys made me come in here and I had to just sit down and visualize my forms and just move my arms while everyone else is jumping around. But there is still a huge benefit to that. And
part of that is called humility.
Part of that is humility. And this is
remember thou art mortal.
Remember that word. And there's a beauty to being an instructor, right? But I think there's so much benefit to us having a conversation like this, or even at the school within ourselves as instructors, where we say these things out loud and realize, oh, okay, I got to remember that for myself because now, my ankle hurts or whatever it is all the things that we're able to tell our students to try to help them along the journey can then be reflected back on us, which is something we talk about a lot, which is the advice that we give is almost always advice that we know that we also need to hear continuously.
We know that that's for you for sure because you keep telling us that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's almost selfish, which is why I always say I'm really a selfish person.
So we've kind of defined the things, right? And I know I keep throwing out your sifu has the answer, and that's not good because that means any of my students listening is like going to come to me and just say, all right, give me all the answers.
The sifu doesn't have the answer. The sifu can help you find the answer.
Right. But so essentially, I think what else can we really share though? Maybe specifically our personal experience of what we considered to be a plateau or being on the plateau and what that kind of felt like and how did we overcome that or are we still there?
I remember as maybe in intermediate student learning a form in Wallem called straight form and taking a full year to learn a pretty, now looking back, simple or basic form. And always going, man, it took me a full year to do it. But I never looked at that negatively. I always thought, after it was completed, I was like, wow, this is so awesome, because I remember starting it and going, I'm not sure how much I like this, and by the end loving it. But then realizing, wow, it took me a full year just to do that. I always remember that because there are students, if you're an instructor, you always have students that feel that they should be learning more. And
learning quicker.
Correct. Learning faster. And so that's part of that. And then another part of, I think, with the plateau is, if I look back, is there are certain times where I felt, oh, I should be able to do these certain skills, like more flexibility, things like that. And I just haven't been able to. But again, looking back, as long as you have the right mindset, you go, but there's so many other things layered on top of that I learned along the way. And so it's not so much that you can just say, I'm going to brush that on the rug. You learn from it. But there's that Ted Lasso line of like, be a goldfish or something. It's like, yeah, just don't dwell so much on it. Think about like the positive stuff and then let's move on.
I think you are very good at the plateau because you have that mindset innately, like naturally. I was just talking to some of the younger students about, some of us have things that we are naturally more capable at, that it just comes a little bit easier, right? And some of us have had to develop skills or techniques or things, whether it be physical or mental, that like you have to practice at it. I think naturally you are good at taking your time with things and having that type of patience mindset. I think back to the straight form year, and I'm trying to recall if it was the year you were juggling multiple things or if we literally just...
Yeah, I think I was learning line dance and probably had a couple jobs. I don't know. You know what I mean?
I feel like it was, around the time you're juggling a lot of different things. And so your curriculum learning, because this happens to a lot of our advanced students that also become expert in lion and music and the performance side of things, as well as sometimes the teaching side of things. And then also this and this. And so they feel a lot of times that maybe they're not learning according to what they should by certification, right? Like by levels, quote unquote, like how many forms I've learned in X amount of years. But then if you sit back and go, right, but you have all these other skills. I mean, you're also a strength training coach. You're also...
So to give your analogy of taking a look back and looking at it
because
this way,
hindsight, right?
Maybe another way to think about it is not just to look back and see the further back you go, the straighter that line is, but the more of a 360 3D view you look at it, because the line didn't just plateau and become straight. The line expanded.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was learning a lot more Tai Chi. I was learning so many other things as well. So that line just expanded of learning.
Right.
And yeah, I mean that. So I don't know. That it makes you rethink the word plateau.
Right. That's what I said.
There never has been a plateau. I don't think there ever has.
Exactly.
There have been injuries, but even that hasn't been a setback. It's been an opportunity.
Exactly.
I've said this before, when you're in the shit, it's hard to see outside of it.
Oh yeah.
But when you're out of it,
you can... the misery now, like today.
When you're out of it and you look back, as long as you're looking in the right way, you go, oh, there never was a plateau and the injury was never a setback. It was always an opportunity. And the journey has always been positive. So I don't know how you want to define it. It could be linear, whatever, but it always was expanding. It always was moving forward.
And I think for students who, like you said, when you're in it, it's very hard to tell yourself. But I'm pretty sure, regardless of age, even our 10-year-olds can look back in their life at a time in which they thought was difficult, or they weren't achieving, or they didn't do something as well. I mean, we could just point to any student and say, well, what about your first day? How did that feel?
Yeah.
Where have you come since then? And just kind of remembering and recognizing our start point to where we're at, and thinking about other instances. Because like you said, when you're in it and you're injured, it sucks.
It sucks.
It sucks. And you don't have motivation to do other things because you're not doing the things that you initially want to do. You have to reframe that, kind of, like you said, list out all the things you can do and then look at it and go, oh, I've been wanting to, improve this anyway. But so much easier said than done.
This is why it's so important. So I think if there's a message that we can get, let's just say be just to our students first, our current Volume students, if we can just get the message across of just don't stop. Don't stop coming in unless you're contagious and you have some kind of disease that's contagious.
Don't show up.
Don't show up. But other than that, if you are able to, you could have a broken leg. If you're able to come in and let's find a way that you can still be involved and still get that broader scope of realizing of what an opportunity it is that you have. Not easy. You're right. I don't think it's easy at all.
Yeah.
I think if there's a way that we can communicate that to our students and be successful with them, that, like I said, it would reflect back to us, but then we can then also broaden that out and maybe have it to other people, anyone who's not a student is listening to this. So it's interesting because, again, this is the benefit of having these conversations is that it makes you work things out as you're speaking it, right? Because as usual, when we have a conversation, or like, oh, let's talk on the podcast, there's usually a 1-minute conversation about what it's going to be. And then we can dig deeper into it, right?
Yeah. And to kind of answer the question that I asked you, I can consider the last 10 years of my life as a plateau, if I want to look at it that way. Or let's just take the last 2 years where I dedicated a ginormous amount of time to working on my Asian American history bill, right? And physically did all of my martial training suffer? 100%. Was I able to put the same amount of energy into it that I would normally have liked to? I would definitely say I didn't feel like, according to the timeline that's in my head or in the graph that I would draw for myself. But then you look and you have to make decisions on what does that mean? What does that mean you're doing in other areas, right? So I want people to also remember, as long as you don't stop, like Oscar said, because it's like I still have my classes, I would still be here. It's not like I left and moved to another country for 2 years and came back and I did zero Kung Fu. It was still a part of my daily life, daily practice, whether it was doing a class here and there, whether it was walking through a forum, whether it was meeting with the Sifus from around, like you're still inundated. Like it wasn't the daily practice I would have liked because so much of my energy went to something else. But I have to look back and go, was that worth it, quote unquote? Or did other things expand? Was I able to make an impact for generations to come for community? Answer is yes. So that makes me feel good. And that is, to me, martial arts. Like I think people also have to realize, yes, you need to physically be there and going, but there are things you can be doing as a martial artist that don't always mean kicking and punching.
Yeah, this has been a recurring theme, I think, for 2023 for you. And it makes me think also it's very rare that I have regrets, right? But one of the things is I look back and say, wow, it's been about 10 years that I quit my full-time pharmaceutical job to do this. And the regret that I sometimes have, for instance, is like, I should be further along. I should have expanded this specific skill here or there. And so there's one part about looking back where there's the positives, like, well, let me look at all these other things that I do. But I also have to recognize that not just these past 10 years, but a lot of times in my life, I have wasted time on certain things. I don't look at it negatively, really, like as far as like I'm beating myself about it, but that is also approaching it like how Adam Grant says in his book, Think Again, you should approach things like a scientist and be like, well, these are just the facts. The facts are that there were times where I spent too much time watching a stupid movie, case in point last night, right? Or when we had that, was it a year or two of playing too many video games until you looked up and said, oh, this is how much time and we just stopped, right? So those are learning experiences. So I don't want also for anyone who's listening or watching to look back and say, everything is always so positive. Everything that we did is great but if you can look back and say, okay, realistically, that was a waste of time there, like what I did there. Maybe they had some benefit, but I could have used that time better. I realize that those are just facts. I'm not going to be dwelling on it. I'm not going to be negative about it, but that could have been used as a better time. Okay, now I'm going to learn from that and then try to use that moving forward. And also, if we look at ourselves as Sifus, and also we're business owners, and also we're trying to promote positive things, then we need to level ourselves up in order to be able to do those things successfully. And the only way to do that is with reflection, the positive mindset, the right peers, the right instructor, the right Sifu. All of those things have to kind of come together. So the recurring theme for this whole journey is, I think, you having the right mindset, and then you also having and finding the right instructor, Sifu, for yourself.
Yeah, and that's not always easy.
No.
Right? And so self-awareness is really difficult, because a few episodes ago, you shared quite a bit on we're the hero of our own story, and no matter what, we can either be the hero or the victim in that story, right? It's all about us. It's where we're very much the main character. But I think we probably don't have time today, but maybe in the future we can have a discussion on finding the right Sifu, what that means, how that's defined, because I feel like that also is a pairing of personalities. So just because someone is a very good martial arts teacher doesn't mean it's your martial arts teacher, because it has to be someone that you connect with, that speaks to you. One, the martial arts style has to be the one that you take to and it's for you. But just because a martial arts teacher wasn't for you, it also doesn't mean they were not a good one.
Correct.
It just means they were not the one for you.
Right.
And I think that gets very confused and thrown around, right? Oh, I studied with this person, but they weren't any good.
Right.
I'm like, was that the case, or were they just not for you? Now, to be fair, there are a lot of not great martial arts teachers out there, just like any other industry, any other sport. There's good coaches, there's not so good coaches, but I'm just want it to be clear that it's finding the right match. It's not necessarily like knowing that just because someone's really good is going to work out for you either, in terms of your journey and your career, I think.
And that thought process of, you're the hero of your own story. I've come more and more to just believe that every person is living their own reality, and that reality may be completely opposite of what your reality is. And it's so hard for you to change that. So this is to solidify, like, I agree with what you're saying of, like, you finding the right match can, sometimes it's magical. It's like, boom, it just happens. And sometimes it takes trial and error. And unfortunately, trial and error can be very frustrating and leave you with a bad taste in your mouth. But I'm going to butcher it, how this guy that I follow, Dwayne Ludwig, who does that Bang Muay Thai, he said something about the martial artist. Martial, of course, is the war and the warrior part. Artist means something that has to do with your soul, with what you feel you were put on this earth to do. And so if you really want to be a martial artist, hopefully having a bad interaction won't prevent you from continuing yourself on that journey. Maybe you need some time for self-reflection or whatnot, or a break, but hopefully you don't give that up, because there's so much benefit and beauty to it. And we see it all the time. We see the amazing things that it can do for other people. So yeah, there's a lot, I guess, to think about there.
I didn't want to use this analogy, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I feel like a lot of Sifus out there who hopefully are listening will feel this empathy and pain, but it's like finding the right therapist, right? Which we don't want to be, by the way. Your Sifu should not be your therapist. That is not our job or role, but it is finding the right person that you can build a trust with. And that doesn't mean it's the wrong, it doesn't mean they're not good. It's just not the right one for you. And it sometimes will take a lot of tries to get the right one, but you shouldn't give up, because it's something that's definitely worthwhile or can be helpful for you. So, and
realize that they're human also. Whoever you choose to help you and to be your
except
guide.
For Grandmaster Chan.
Okay, he's not human.
He's not human.
Physically, he's not human. But I mean,
yeah, but
we just all make mistakes, and so many mistakes, right? And if there's, this is back to your point of, if there's that trust that you have with your Sifu, then you can come back from mistakes that both people make. Right?
Well, and a good student and a good Sifu would know when to admit that they've made mistakes.
Which I think is hard. It's hard with that relationship. I don't want to be accusatory, but I don't feel like I would see Master Chan apologizing for anything. Even though he's right, it's probably rare. He's like, I'm sorry. Actually, these days he's so gentle.
He's real chill. He's real chill.
Well, he's super energetic.
Like the koi fish.
But he's very
He's
just
like watching a koi fish, because every morning we feed those fish and it's like, oh, they're so, going through the water and their tail and it fans and he's gentle. But really, once you throw the food in there, it's like crazy. It's like
Great
wildfire.
analogy,
and so he's kind of like that. He's all over the place, but also he's really like serene and
one with the water.
And yeah. So it's fun to watch. But in any case, the martial arts journey is a complicated one. And essentially, it's very much a mental game. If you can kind of keep the right mindset, you have a good Sifu, and you think about all of the journey as being the line and the waves and the staircase and all of it, but knowing that you're going to do your best to have the right mindset along the way, then you'll have a successful journey. And that's really just defined by you. So you have the ability to define that journey for yourself, and hopefully you have a good guide on that journey. But we definitely feel fortunate to be able to do what we do. We really enjoy what we do. We wouldn't keep coming back to it if we didn't, because we really do love being on vacation. And it is nice, though, to kind of come back, be grounded. And I have to say, I told Oscar, when I returned from the trip, I was like, oh gosh, back to real life. And it was really nice to see how much the students missed us and just were smiling, wanted to hear about things, welcomed us back, and just feeling the temple energy. It was a really nice feeling, and it is definitely home. So
correct. Yeah. Well said.
All right. Until next time, everybody.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.